Your first step is always going to be reality capture. There's not very many people who are using every single technology, and AR and VR and mobile, and so the idea of continuing to ask these questions, it really helps all of us think, how do we collaborate to make those types of solutions viable?
Activities had to do with a terrestrial scanner a year ago, you can do them with a mobile scanner today.
But as things have advanced with technology advancements, workflow, simplicity, pricing points, they're major drivers for adoption into other industries.
Like, they didn't want us to do it, and then we did it, showed them what the results were at our own cost, and the next thing you know, they're like, we absolutely need this.
Really, probably the greatest advancement in the world of scanning in the last 5 or 10 years has been the size of the instrumentation necessary to collect the data.
Ease of capture and frequency of capture is going to become more important than the accuracy.
We have thousands of users using the data.
So I've got a few questions prepared, and we're going to jump around a little bit, but we're going to start over here with you, Josh.
Okay.
So my first question would be, how have we seen the market and need for laser scanning and reality capture solutions change over the past 5 or 10 years?
So I think a lot of what we're seeing is the adoption into a lot of different industries. When we look back at what's changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years, you know, industries like survey really started to build this out. They were early adopters of the technology. But as things have advanced with technology advancements, workflow, simplicity, pricing points, they're major drivers for adoption into other industries. So think building construction, huge growth in this industry, thinking about, you know, such mandatory scanning requirements on a lot of these projects, especially when we think about the mega projects happening in the construction world, public safety, facilities management. And it's not only the technology advancements that's, I think, is helping this change over the last 5 to 10 years, but it's the access to the data. We've seen so many software companies and the developers want to implement reality capture data. And from that, more and more users are accessing the data now. It's becoming more accessible. And with that, that's driving the demand. And so when that demand starts to be driven, it's allowing, you know, more and more people to want that data and ask for that data. And in return, I think that's also what allows us to continue the exciting innovation, because the market's being driven in different ways with different specifications and demands.
Love it. Thank you. Mr. Brett.
Me?
And I know, you know, part of this, it makes me think about, even during your presentation, you talked about one of the companies that was pretty sold and using your solution really heavily. But when you think about reality capture in a whole, and you've been in it for a while, what types of industries or specific project use cases do you see reality capture becoming a mandatory, where you actually see that being requested or needed, and maybe what areas you've seen slow to adoption from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the mandatory usually for us in my old industry came from the owner, right? The owner would say, we want this, this, and this. And really what drove that mandatory requirement was them seeing the value of it first, right? Like, they didn't want us to do it, and then we did it and showed them what the results were at our own cost. And the next thing you know, they're like, we absolutely need this. You know, and it pays dividends, right? Like, I mean, I was involved in one project where it wasn't a big project, maybe $4 million. It was a new elevator system and dust collection on top of a silo. And while this project isn't really significant, the big thing about this project is it was totally scanned, RFI free. The only project I've ever been involved with in my life that didn't have an RFI involved. And, you know, the client really looked at that and said, not only should we look at this process as something that we should do all the time, but we should scale it to our bigger projects and stuff like that. And so that's where we started to see that mandatory requirement from our owners that were working on that. Now, I would say that I was in a very specific situation, right? I was dealing with cement plants that were 50 years old. The drawings literally may have been 70, 80 years old. So, not for everyone. There may be as-built out there for newer facilities that are a little bit more accurate. But with all the changes and facilities management activities that go on, when you start a new engineering project, scanning really should be something that we're all making mandatory, right? Because it really solidifies not only what's there, but are the as-built dependable? So, every mandatory situation I've ever come across is owner-driven. I think that if the government did it, that people would resist it. You know what I'm saying? You look at like the UK, right? Like I deal with a lot of clients in the UK, and in a lot of situations, they're unhappy not because they want to adopt the technology, but just because they're being forced to do so.
Yeah.
Right. In a lot of ways, though, I think that mandatory aspect should come from the owner, right? Because they're the ones that are cutting the checks to build the building. So, I haven't seen a lot of mandatory scanning requirements come from anything but the owner. But I think that may be the best place for those mandatory requirements to come from.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that makes sense. And I think I bring up that question because I think over the years of doing scanning, you start seeing initially, 10 years ago, people weren't asking for it. You had to go do it and convince them and show them the data. And now you start to see it on airports and hospitals and places that it's been used and proven. You start seeing like, oh, that's actually part of the project. If you win that job as a construction company or an architect there's scanning involved. There's a scan to BIM process involved. You actually start seeing those become part of the request. And I think we're still at a point that's growing, but we are seeing it more. So thank you very much. All right, next one's for Faro. And some of these questions are positioned, knowing that we have a diverse audience here of some that don't know where we were 5 years ago. I want to know from your perspective, Mr. Kipp, what's one of the biggest advancements we've seen in the technology itself over the last 5 or 10 years? What's your thought there?
I think really probably the greatest advancement in the world of scanning in the last 5 or 10 years has been the size of the instrumentation necessary to collect the data, right? It used to be, I remember 2010 at Autodesk University, I'm sitting in a booth and with a scanner that was about 148 pounds of gear. Had a battery on it, looked like you could start the space shuttle with this thing. And I remember seeing the very first Focus scanner that year. And I remember going back to my boss, and I'm like, oh man, we're in trouble, right? But that adoption, that concept of how can we do more with less, right? It's pervasive throughout our industry. When you think about scanning itself as a whole, you mentioned data. Data is the new oil. It truly is, right? How do we get data from point A to point B? I can go buy 2 tape measures from the exact same tape manufacturer, and I can line them up side by side, and I not guarantee it, but I can probably find a couple that are wrong. But the problem is, which one is it? I don't know, right? The thing about LiDAR scanning is it allows you to capture the real world in such a way that it's almost not questionable. But I think the biggest advancement has been in certainly the size of the scanner. Obviously, speed is becoming more and more prevalent. Let's be honest, there's only so much you can do with a scanner. You can make them bigger, you can make them smaller, you can make them faster, you can make them collect 5 million points a second, but unless it provides value to you as the end user or to your customer, there is no value in whatever we create as a technology company, right? So it's important that we have this level of engagement with both our customers and so forth, and I think that's probably the third point, would be the level of engagement that we see from you as the end users coming back to companies like us as we continue to develop. Because without you, we would be just a bunch of nerds sitting in a closet saying, I got a good idea. You got a good idea? I got a good idea.
I got some decent.
Yeah, you got some great ideas, right? So I think those are probably the 3 things.
Thank you. I agree. And I think that's part of why we tried to bring this together. I haven't seen very many times that we've got to sit and ask whatever question we want to Leica and Faro and Clear all at the same time. So I'm bringing together selfishly what I wanted to hear from, as well as hopefully some of you guys that want to ask questions. So thank you. All right, next we got ClearEdge. So, and some of these questions, you know, after we get through, depending on the time we have, if some of you have answers that you want to circle back to a question, you're welcome to as well. So Kelly, knowing all of this technology, what is one of the realistic changes you think that we'll see in the short term ahead of us, you know, in the next 2 to 4 years, whether it's a hardware side or a software side, what's something that you think that we might see coming up?
Ooh, gosh. All right. Well, I think we are reaching an interesting inflection point in terms of the innovation that we're seeing with hardware right now, which is we've kind of hit this plateau of fast enough, accurate enough, good enough with terrestrial laser scanners, and they've kind of plateaued. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that happens with every technology. And I think we are, you know, right on the cusp of some of these other technologies, be it mobile scanning, things like that. You know, I remember when I got started, the first mobile scanner that I saw, I was blown away by the productivity, but super let down by the quality of the data, right? And I was like, this is amazing, this is terrible. You know, and it's you know, it's going through its own ramp, right? And you know, I think we are reaching that point where mobile scanners are really legitimately starting to, you know, basically replace activities that you had to do with a terrestrial scanner a year ago. You can do them with a mobile scanner today. And that's going to keep progressing. So like, I'm extremely excited to see that progress just because of the productivity they provide. I think the other big change that's really, really exciting is just kind of the continual progress of technology. We are rapidly approaching the point where cloud infrastructure is viable for reality capture technology. I mean, I think, you know, sitting next to me, we've got this guy from Sintu here, and you know, 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been a product because it would have taken so bleeping long to upload your scan data to the cloud that it was not tenable. Mm-hmm. And we are rapidly approaching that point where, you know, 5G is rolling out. We've got much better bandwidth in a good chunk of the world. And that's going to be something that's a slow rollout to other parts of the world. But that transfer of information up to the cloud really is opening up our ability to do all the different collaboration, all the things that you've seen with your Word documents or your Excel files or all this other stuff 10 years ago. It's finally coming to fruition in our niche of the world. And that's, I think, also incredible and exciting and wonderful. So
great response.
Hardware, software.
Thank you.
Sort of.
All right, we're going to bounce over to Paul at QPix. So, in fact, part of what you said, Kelly, leads into this question is just with where we see things on the mobile side and the imagery side, do you think at any point in the future the mobile side or the photogrammetry side would replace terrestrial laser scanning?
Well, first off, I'm not a reality capture expert. I play one at RCN, just so everybody knows. So, am I allowed a pass?
You are.
No.
If you'd like. These are off-the-cuff questions, so. I can rephrase personal opinion. Do you think that the imagery side and kind of, you know, we've seen several platforms and we know they're similar to Sintu, they're similar to QPix, there's the mobile data, there's the handheld scanners. Do you think that a lot of the use cases of terrestrial scanning today will be replaced by mobile or imagery solutions in the future?
Well, I think terrestrial has its place when you talk accuracy. And I think the future really, I see it as, you know, as opposed to people moving to thinking they need accuracy, that ease of capture and frequency of capture is going to become more important than the accuracy. And I see that as more important. And I think all the data is useful in some way. Where I think really it needs to go is in the speed of it to really become almost real time in accessing this data so that you can analyze it, predict, and make better decisions. And, if you look back to terrestrial scanning, maybe you could do it once a month if you're lucky. It's just not often enough to be able to make those types of decisions. So it's going to be taking the terrestrials, so I think daily, it's really making it real time. Then you're really going to be able to start making changes in, if I think of just construction, because construction sites are changing every day. And so to be able to make those decisions and make transformative, changes to that process, you need more data to be able to do that.
Great response. And don't worry, I did ask them to take boxing gloves off before we started. Thank you. All right. Last question on my end for Mr. Dominique. So when we're talking about data, even today with how far we've come, that is still one of the biggest complaints about these technologies is how much data it creates, the size of the data, hosting the data, sharing. I get the question all the time, how do you send your clients the data? I'm like, well, you send to Dropbox, ShareFile, flash drives, everybody's still doing a little bit of everything.
Can't forget the original.
So do you think that the future of the data problem that we have, do you think it's that we'll be able to decrease the actual data size, or do you think it's going to be an I'm going to stumble my words here. Do you think we're going to improve the process? And I know you guys are doing this a bit with compression and upload and download. Could you just give us your thoughts on the data, where it is now and where you think we're going to be able to improve on that issue?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, when I was at Autodesk working on Recap, we found that one of the last data type that was not yet cloud compatible was reality data, very desktop centric. So people had to ship hard disk or USB sticks, to get the data to their colleagues. The pandemic has shown that if you don't embrace cloud, at some point you are stuck. You cannot ensure your business continuity. So you need to make this kind of data fully cloud compatible, accessible from anywhere at any time, and this is part of the democratization of it. Okay, so this is a space we're in, definitely. I don't feel the size of the data matters because we spend a lot with Amazon on Azure, but hosting huge amount of data is not a big issue. This is not where we spend the money. So the size of the data doesn't matter as long as you can compress it in a nice way to make the upload fast enough. And this is what we do. And I think that the other point we have is that, again, working at Autodesk on recaps, at some point we found that for one scan, one surveyor doing the scan, there will be 20 people using the data, either in Autodesk, Revit, or Navisworks or AutoCAD. Now what we see with what we do with a simple web browser, we have thousands of users using the data. So democratization is also giving access to this data to not only expert engineers, BIM manager, VDC engineers, but also electricians, plumbers, owners, whoever. So I think that, this is what we try to do on making it also on an agnostic way. I strongly believe in the agnosticity on multimodality as well. Okay, today there is as many platforms as you have modalities. So if you are doing photogrammetry, you have one platform. If you're doing laser scanning, you have another platform. If you have a Leica scanner, you have a platform. If you have a fire scanner, you have another platform. So I strongly believe that there must be, of course, this is our play. So this is our vision. But multimodality, being able to embrace laser scan data together with 360 images, drone data, iPhone data, plus being completely hardware agnostic is what we aim at, definitely. And that will be part of this democratization of reality data.
Thank you. Thank you. My last question, and again, if anybody has questions, you're welcome to head over to the mic. My last question, I'll let a couple of you answer, whoever would like to. I like thinking where we're going. Where are we going to be in the future? Where are we going to be in 10 or 15 years with these technologies? I don't even care if it's universally huge in your mind. Just where is something that we're going to see in 10 or 15 years, whether it's the integration of virtual reality, on-site, digital AR during construction. What are some things that you guys are thinking about without sharing, confidential information. I'd love to hear a couple futuristic thoughts from you guys.
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to, you mentioned we're at this precipice, right? From a hardware perspective, right? I mean, we all want that Prometheus moment where we could just click these, gravity-defying balls and throw them up in the air, and they just, right? Where everybody wants that. Is that beyond the realm of possibility today? Possibly. But is it a dream? Certainly. Right? I mean, look at some of the internal drones now that are being built. They're specifically designed to bounce off walls, right? Inside mines and inside tunnels. Maybe that's the first iteration of the Prometheus ball, right? But it all comes down to, from a hardware perspective, it all comes back to one thing. Two phrases that I mentioned earlier: collection and consumption. I believe the next side is going to be on the consumption side. I believe it's going to come through the concept of the standardization and adoption in the mainstream society that augmented reality and virtual reality are no longer a luxury item, but is something that is going to become part of a predominant culture within the concept of both construction, engineering. Look what's happened where we are today with COVID. With the number of organizations that now say, I want to allow my employees to work remotely. I'm okay with that. I also need to mitigate the human interaction within the confines of a particular structure for the safety of my employees and my visitors. So all of a sudden, the adoption of virtual reality and augmented reality now becomes, we need this. How far can we drive it? And everybody up here right now, we are all part of that ecosystem to create content for that kind of function. And you, as reality capture experts, are on the cutting edge in many ways from that perspective as well. So I think that's probably where we're going to see this biggest drive is through the adoption and the concept of augmented reality and virtual reality becoming mainstream, and the fact that scanning is no longer a luxury. It is becoming a primary function to be construction, engineering, nuclear, and all these other functionalities that traditionally would stick some guy on a scaffolding or on a ladder. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd like to back up what Kip said here, is that I do believe that it will be on the consumption side. And I believe Kip said it best earlier when, over the past 10 years, what have you seen? You've seen scanners get smaller, faster, more efficient, right? But how are we uploading that information into our design software, into our construction software? Has that changed? No, not at all. The only thing that's making it better for us is that hard drives are getting faster, processors are getting faster, right? I'm just now getting to the point where I can open up a point cloud and expect it to open in 20 seconds. Back in 2012, I'd be like, I'm going to open this file, and then I'll just go get some lunch, and then I'll walk my dog a little bit, and maybe hang out at the water cooler once I get back for 30 minutes, and then maybe it'll be done.
No, Revit will have just opened.
But I forgot to hit. I forgot to hit that okay, right? Like I forgot to hit that okay, so now I'm 4 hours deep into this process. No, you're exactly right. It's got to be on consumption, and it kind of goes into the hardware aspect and the software aspect. It feels like every time software makes a jump, the hardware part of it is hard to deal with, right? Like I remember jumping to the X330 and Pharaoh scene, and the computers we were using just weren't adequate. But after time passed, 5 years later, it was like, this is working the way that I expected it to work. Yeah. And so the one thing you got to remember is that scanning and hardware are not necessarily thought of, like people that are advancing hardware don't think about reality capture at all, I'm sure. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think it's shifting with augmented reality.
That's true. But, and then reality capture advances and then the hardware can't keep up. Like, I mean, SSDs was one of the best things that ever happened to reality capture. So, I think that you're always going to see that offset stair step of software goes here, hardware goes here, software goes here, hardware goes there.
Tag me in. Yeah, so like at the end of the day, to kind of tie this, what we make in the construction profession in terms of whether it's on the design side with drawings, these 2D drawings, they're an artifact of technology. We don't make 2D drawings because 2D drawings are necessary to build a building. We make 2D drawings because 100 years ago we had paper and pens.
And that's what the lawyers tell you to do.
Yeah,
too.
and we had to make drawings. And then the lawyers encoded that, and now you still have to have them even though we don't need them. Amen. But, at the end of the day, anybody that's worked with a client knows that showing them 2D drawings and, elevations which are not in perspective and like it's confusing as fuck for people that don't think like we do. And so, if you put that in front of the client and ask them to make decisions, it's a miserable process. And so the beauty of what we do in this space is, and why calling it reality capture is so important, is we're really kind of capturing things in a way that actually makes sense to 99% of humans' brains instead of just 1% of humans' brains. And the tools are still catching up to how do we then display that information back to the client. And the legal side is still catching up and probably will be for the next 30 years. But at the end of the day, we are feeding information into this system. And the tools are developing to help consume it. And if you put somebody, Sentu's they've got a headset up there. You can go put yourself in a point cloud today, right now, right? If you put a person that does not work in 3D models, that does not work in an abstract way with building documentation, you put them in an AR or VR environment where they can actually perceive the way their brain was meant to perceive space. They are so much more informed, so much more capable of making decisions, so much more capable of making good decisions. And that's what we all enable. And that's where that gap is right now. That huge gap is still, how do we get that information into the hands of the people that actually pay all of us money to do things? And that's where we can, I think, really provide a lot of value back to the profession, back to the industry, and hopefully back to ourselves to continue to fund innovation, right? Absolutely.
Dominique.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the future for us belongs to what we call digital twins. This is definitely a concept that embraces the life cycle of any building, factory, plant, or rig, whatever. And all the big companies today have their own digital twin strategy. Okay, so if we can hook our reality data and make it like a first-class citizen in all kinds of digital twin workflow, then there is a business for everybody. Because we need to scan every factory in the world to make it a digital twin. And we need to scan it not only once, but every 2 weeks, every five months. So there will be a lot of data. If we can make reality capture data or reality data, this must have first-class citizen data in all kinds of digital twin workflows. The future belongs to digital twins.
Thank you.
I agree on comments on digital twins. Being a little pessimistic here, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell what was going to happen. And quite honestly, I don't think anything is going to be transformative unless there's some killer app or huge technological advance to make it mainstream. And I mean, there's companies out there trying or tried. Intel just recently got rid of RealSense Group. Google got rid of the Glass. And, Magic Leap, Oculus, they're not mainstream. A lot of people are trying. And I think it's, I wish I knew what the killer app was going to be, or it was in my head to create that killer app. It's not. But, I think that's really what's going to happen. And then it's, everybody's going to hop on that bandwagon after that. So
It's not ubiquitous if you have to mandate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think of what everyone said, I couldn't agree more. And, I think that data is the future. I mean, we talk so much about it. If you look at the history of what's been happening with data, I mean, the curve of what's happening is just exponential, right? I mean, it's insane. And I think that everyone's starting to realize this. And I think that, data not only allows, a surgeon to make a better decision when he has you cut open, but data allows you, an engineer to make a better decision on a pipe or on a bridge. And the more that we can make this accessible to more professionals, more commercial level, more consumer level, the more that we'll see the adoption and start to see things change. I mentioned real time multiple times today, and I think that while real time means real time, I think that we'll see that continue to change in the future, down to where there's baselines of information in the cloud, and real time and consumer devices can be actually updating that information. From the moment if I walked in the room and then you actually joined through augmented reality, you would see the updates based on some device that I was holding in my hand or I was wearing on my head. And that really starts to feed. Or even the information could be coming from the sensors on autonomous cars. It realizes that there's a traffic sign that's fell on the road. That feeds the system through things like 5G that's changing how we share data and transform data. And that becomes readily accessible for better decisions and more safety when we think about the autonomous future.
I mean, IoT, less than 5 years ago, IoT was everywhere, right? I mean, you couldn't pick up a magazine without seeing the word IoT someplace, right? And I think you're right. I think that sensor function that has now become basic in almost every aspect of our life, the LiDAR that's in your car, right? And so forth. I think if you were to really put a pie in the sky thing for me, I see this concept of, I think about the Prometheus moment, but I think about the concept of swarm scanning, right? But what I'm thinking about in the world of swarm scanning isn't a bunch of scanners working in sync with each other in the confines of a single structure, but everything that we do in our day-to-day lives and those sensors all then working together to map our entire world around us continually, right? I mean, digital twin is everywhere. That's the new buzz phrase. You can't pick up, once again, you can't pick up the trade magazine without seeing digital twin someplace. But the problem is, I could ask everybody in this room, give me a definition of digital twin, and I'll come up with, I'm not going to say you're all going to have separate answers, but they're not going to be a holistic answer, right? They're going to be sporadic and so forth. But because I think digital twin reaches its own, it's like water. It reaches its own level with each person. And your digital twin isn't necessarily my digital twin. If I'm a fire protection guy and all I got to do is count sprinkler heads, guess what? 360 photos works perfect for me because all I got to do is count sprinkler heads. That's important to me. That's my digital twin. So I think the concept of digital twin is going to kind of become less important. And you mentioned the digital twin of factory world. I think that's through the ability to create digital data and to create digital information that allows these factories to run simulations and so forth. I think that's probably going to happen sooner rather than later, right? So.
Yeah. It comes back to multimodality as well. I kind of as a joke, every time I hear digital twin, I always respond back with digital octuplet, because the reality is there's not just one. There's never going to be just one digital twin. There's always going to be specific needed ones, which ties into a lot of what we've said. But I know you're probably also looking for a segue. We've got a line of questions from the audience.
I am.
So
Yes.
that's all good. I don't want to keep talking.
I think great answers from all of you. Thank you. I agree. I think I've been hearing a lot and seeing a lot in the digital twin space. And I think what we'll probably see there to merge both ideas is that digital twin is going to be a big part moving forward. What we'll probably see is a certain level of detail or accuracy or whatever of the digital twin based on the use case of what that owner or industry is actually going to use the digital twin for. Thank you very much. So I know we have some questions lined up. We can roll over to you guys.
For the veteran laser scanning professionals and surveyors, what concerns or dangers do you see from folks like me who are not surveyors but who realize that they need to invest in a scanner to understand the workflows, to do better, to be able to better do what we do? What concerns or dangers do you see from having this technology and apparatus available to folks that are not trained surveyors?
All right, I'll take a stab at that. So I think, the danger always comes down to the question of accuracy. But I think the thing that gets missed a lot of times is, what are you relating it to? So this is always the challenge with adoption of technology. Whenever you see a new technology, people always will say, oh, well, how does that compare to perfection? I cannot tell you how many times I had a professional surveyor come out to my job site and give me a control point that was 3 feet off. I cannot tell you the amount of times I found errors and omissions and issues. So to me, I think the danger is that the accuracy is something that's really hard to understand. And I think we need to be better as vendors in presenting information to our customers that help qualify and quantify the accuracy so that you can make more informed decisions. I don't think the danger actually comes from people that aren't surveyors using this kind of equipment. I think the danger comes from the fact that if it's not obvious to you what the impacts are on the accuracy, how that affects the quality of what you're collecting and what all the decisions you're basing off of that information, if you aren't informed as a less expert than a surveyor, that's actually us hindering you from making good decisions. But I don't think that's your fault. I think that's our fault. I love to see technology in people's hands because at the end of the day, I would much rather you have a laser scanner and make a few small mistakes than have a tape measure and make hundreds of large mistakes. So we've got to compare technology not to perfection, but what is the standard practice? And I have yet to put the laser scanner in the hands of somebody with almost no training and have them come back with worse than they come back with a tape measure. Like, oh my God, please take a freaking laser scanner and go scan it. You literally cannot fuck up nearly as bad as if I hand you a tape measure. So
Thanks.
that doesn't scare me a bit.
Yeah,
so-
I'd like to take something at this. So, like, when I started at the last position I was at, and I talked about this earlier, I mean, I walked into coffee stained paper and Excel spreadsheets, right? So we start undertaking all of this software, and, the danger for me in that specific situation was nobody understanding what I was doing and why I was doing it. A lot of the times I explain the situation as, well, a scan is a scan is a scan, right? Well, we know that, drones produce different accuracy and different results than terrestrial scans. And they produce different results than, something like GeoSlam technology or photogrammetry out of an iPhone. So the simple explanation of when do we use what and when was actually a gigantic challenge. And it was also something that played into the cost of everything. So, that's one of the things where, someone would say, hey, we want you to go scan an electrical cabinet so that our guys can read the buttons on it, right? Versus, I want you to go scan an entire industrial facility. Well, why can't you handle that with the same software and the same scanner? Well, it's because it was very difficult to inform these people, right? And so, a big challenge for me was just, how do I get people to understand what I'm doing and why, right? And once they understood that, then it became a lot more clear to them as far as what I was doing. And once that concept got through from the actual work put in the field, then the end results got better and the decisions got better because they were allowing me to do what I needed to do to get them the information that they needed to make those informed decisions. So for any of you that are out there that are trying to get laser scanning going in your company, and maybe it's not going that well, I can relate. Just really try to hammer that home, right? Is it like, a screwdriver? Give you a good example. The screwdriver that I use to fix my cabinet door that always breaks because my family is very aggressive with it is not the same screwdriver that I use to take the hard drive out of my computer. right? And that's the way that we have to look at hardware as well. What's the right tool for the job? I think that's really important.
I'd love, Josh, if you would give a short response. So Josh and I were just standing upstairs talking about this earlier, and we come from a survey background, and I'll actually just give you a little note. We have a land surveying panel tomorrow to talk about specifically the use cases of survey within reality captures and some of the importance. But Josh, if you would wrap up with a small thought based on the conversation we were having of, is survey important on projects, or where do you see that integration? And then we'll roll to the next question.
I think one of the best starting points is the guidance you get when you get into reality capture, and that usually comes from wherever you're purchasing that equipment from and the training you receive. And that training you receive should give you the guidance to understand that you have the best practices based on the reasoning why you're purchasing that equipment. And then it's also part of that process of you're buying the right tool for what you're trying to enter into in reality capture. And during those best practice discussions, you should understand how to validate your data, because almost with any project, when you're speaking with your client, there's some type of accuracy that needs to be obtained. Do you need to be, accurate to 1/8 of an inch? Do you need to be within 2 inches? That's good enough. Well, that 100% requires a different it can have different types of workflows, and it can require different types of validation. To think about that, I need to be able to be within millimeters across 500,000 square feet. I need to have an understanding about probably how to use some targets and use some type of control to be able to validate that data. Otherwise, you're only as good as what type of report the registration said. And that way, you've got a report based on a registration that's not validated against anything. So I think that's what it comes back to. Not every project, not every use case is going to require the survey technology, but you need to have an understanding at least how to validate the data. So when you hand it off to your client, you can rest assured, and so can they, that you've met the requirements. And I think that's the important part is you don't have to be a surveyor. You just need to understand how to validate your data to ensure your accuracies.
Thank you. All right, next question.
So my question is going to be first targeted towards Cintu, since you made the comment that a lot of your larger companies, one of the things that we're going to be moving forward into is going to be cloud-based processing and being able to make that data accessible across an enterprise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What do you say to customers that have really tight security requirements and typically meet those requirements by keeping their data on local desktops, under lock and key, and things of that nature? How do you get those customers to move into those cloud-based processing systems?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. We see, I'll say first, we see a very strong adoption because people trust Amazon or Azure or this kind of solutions, believing that your own private data center would be more secure than an Amazon data center, you're completely wrong, to be honest. So in most cases, what we do today, and we do that, means so we do every 6 months, we do what we call a penetration testing. So we outsource the hacking of our own platform to companies. So we do SOC 2 Type 2 compliancy programs. We only work with Amazon or Azure, which also completely, SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. And so we have less and less of these situations where people don't trust the, say, public cloud as an option to host their data. And those public clouds are today much more secure than any other private solution, to be honest. They invest a lot in security and safety. You have all the backups, all the redundancy taken care of. So at some point, I'll say in our business, we have less and less requirements for private on-premise, I would say, deployments. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but okay.
Thank you.
So my question deals with thinking more towards the future of what I know all of your softwares and hardware is capable of doing now. And it deals both on the AI and machine learning side, but also learning from another industry, which is media and entertainment. So when we talk about the future, when we think about unstructured AI, video is part of that classification. We talk about photogrammetry. But with scanning and barcoding and IoT, all of your softwares and your hardwares have the ability to capture that information and then extrapolate it through video. Are any of you looking at that, thinking about that, taking, the cues from the media and entertainment industry as far as gaming technology and virtual reality inside of, CGI, right? Scanning human beings and then simulating and augmenting what they're doing through movements. We have the same capability in the built world. So, that's what I envision as part of the future. So I guess the first part is, where do we stand with the hardware with regard to video? Because videos are nothing more than still images stitched together, so many images over so many seconds, right? So to me, that's no different than photogrammetry. Where do we stand on the hardware side? And then have you guys looked at that on the software side as well?
It's a pretty far-reaching question.
Well, it's
Everybody
the
in
future
the
of reality
audience,
capture.
everybody in the audience who signed an NDA with ClearEdge, can you please? Oh no. Now, I mean, I think all of us up here are keenly watching these trends. I think we have a particular and unique challenge if you think about the industries that you mentioned in comparison. Relative to the media and gaming industry, we have a particular challenge with global accuracy. There is no such expectation in media and gaming. They don't care. It just needs to be relatively accurate so that it looks good when you see it on screen. I think when you talk about doing various forms of ML on top of images, there is a wonderful academic wealth of research. There are incredible tools out there that are basically available for licensing that work off imagery. Those things don't exist for 3D data. And so, we are, because of where we are in this profession, because of the amount of money that's in this profession for R&D, I think back when I was a contractor, what was the average? Most general contractors spend roughly 1.5 or less. That was like the high end, 1.5% of their profits on R&D, and I think the average was like 0.6.
And they were very unhappy about that.
Yes, that was too much. And so, we have this fundamental struggle in this industry where we have these there's all this wonderful stuff that's out there, but the overlap in our industry is only partial. And so it's very hard to apply something that was designed for 2D image recognition. Like, you can't take the IP that, helps Google recognize cats in photos and then magically apply it to 3D data. It doesn't work. You literally have to start over from scratch. And so there's this kind of setback that we've got in this industry. It's going to take us a long time to catch up to where you are with photos. Now, the good news is our scanners capture photos. So we can do certain things with the photos that our scanners capture. So I think there's a lot of potential for innovation to leverage these things and then apply them to our industry, but it's not as simple as it seems like it should be. And this has been a learning process for me over the last 5 years, coming from industry and coming into the technology side, looking at it and going, oh, you just need to blah, 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 blah. And then you sit down and talk to a PhD who spent 14 years, has 3 PhDs in physics and math, and understands computer vision, has like 47 patents, and goes, yeah, Kelly, it's not that freaking simple. And then he will explain to you in words you cannot freaking understand and will never freaking understand in your lifetime why it's not that simple, and you just kind of have to nod your head and be like, okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that as we think about classifying 3D data, it's much different than photos, right? It's much different than finding the cat in the picture or the stop sign in the picture. It requires, I think, a deeper level of deep learning. I put 2 deeps together there. Sorry about that. But
Double deep learning.
double deep, right? But I think that it is possible. I think there's an exciting future in artificial intelligence, the deep learning that's going to happen not only from photogrammetry, but 3D data as well. I think it's going to take us time to get there. But I think in short, I mentioned something earlier today about artificial intelligence that's driving our cloud platform. We see that in some of what we're doing in mobile mapping as well. And I think that, just in short, I think that there's an exciting future that's possible by what you're speaking about.
And really, if you want us to get there really fast, you just need to buy more scanners.
Thank you for that. Yes, and software. And
So, you know what's
Then we'll have the money for the R&D, so, you scratch my back, we'll scratch yours.
we do take credit cards.
So the one thing I was interested about this question is that question an IoT thing, or is it a photogrammetry reality capture thing? Because my thought is if you go into things like COVID, right? Like something that I think everyone's heard of, right? If you haven't heard about it, I don't know what's going on. But they now have sensors out there, right? And it will tell you when you're violating those 6 feet requirements or you're violating this thing. So my thing is why would we try to capture people with photos when we can just attach a little sensor to their belt and track their movements and then replace that with avatars?
I think they all have cell phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
That the
everyone's already
sensor,
being
and
tracked.
it's maybe not on their
Probably
belt,
pretty
but it's in their pocket.
Well, absolutely. So, you talk about the cell phone aspect, which, obviously I'm not thinking about cell phones as the way I should. Well, but then you get into the aspect of download this on your personal cell phone,
Yeah.
which a lot of people are not going to be okay with because are you tracking me when I'm out for dinner?
Yes.
Yes. The very creepy yes.
And I know what you ordered too.
Because we scanned it with your phone.
No, with your glasses with the cameras in them.
Yeah, exactly. So, you get into these privacy situations, right, with something like this, but I don't think it's too much to ask someone, hey, when you're on the clock, I need you to wear this little sensor, looks like a beeper. Obviously don't wear it out in public. People will think you're dealing drugs, but wear it while you're here, right? And we can track those moves. And if you're talking about GPS, GIS functionality, we can tell what elevation you're at. We can tell where you've moved throughout the building. We can tell where you got injured. We can tell where you slightly avoid injury. We can tell where you had that spat with that coworker that you don't like, right? Like we'd be able to find all that stuff. And I think that personally might be more effective than actually catching people with external cameras and light detection.
Thank you. Next question.
Hey, so reality capture, like, where do we cross over with augmented reality? I know we talked about virtual reality, but like, how do we bring that model into our real world? And how can we do that, I would say, consistently and accurately positioned?
Define accurately.
1/16.
That's the best answer.
Wait 15 years.
Just drag and drop it over a Google image, you're good.
1/16 of a foot? Done.
Yeah, Dominic.
Maybe one comment. I think that the whole stuff about reality capture is to allow anybody to immerse himself or herself virtually into a space. Okay, so to avoid going to on site. Okay, so I see much more future in this virtual reality aspect of it. So being able to be in your home office virtually in any factory or plant or whatever. I have to be honest, I have not yet found the sweet spot for bringing back the reality capture data in the site because you are in the site already. Okay, so just trying to understand what the AR application mean for reality capture.
Yeah.
I think the key, right, is that at the end of the day, what makes AR so hard to accomplish accurately is that we don't have a really great way yet of locally positioning somebody inside a building within a confined space with no GPS access or very low quality GPS access. And so I think several of us have talked at various points about, the future where reality capture is there and it's freely accessible and, there's all this data up in the cloud and it's, streaming down over 5G. I think the short answer, the obvious answer is that previously existing reality capture data is the foundation that allows an accurate positioning of somebody on a job site using some kind of relatively low quality device that they want to do AR with. I mean, I don't think anybody up here is going to be like, wow, that's a great idea. We've all thought of it. It's AR will work when reality capture data is there to replace GPS within a job site. That's when a high accuracy AR will be viable in the construction space, full stop. We're not there yet. We're a ways away from that. All of us are a ways from that. But that's where I think it ties in. And then the use cases, I think, blossom, right? Because if you actually know where you are, oh gosh, installation instructions, oh gosh, maintenance, oh gosh. I mean, we can all think of 100 different things that would be super cool, but you got to know where the heck you are accurately. And it's really hard to do that with the information that's currently available for those sensors to try and localize themselves with. It's just not there.
So follow-up question. What if you do have accurate control on the job site? You have 2 points that you can accurately pinpoint your precision to and align the model in real life. Then when we can overlay that model into real life, does that allow reality capture to continue its life, or does that just go straight to BIM and VDC? Do we stop capturing reality and just compare straight to, straight in the field, right? If you can see this ductwork like over us and you can see that it's off, do we even capture that anymore? Or do we just compare it? So that's, sorry.
I was pondering the question that was asked first here, and is reality capture in VR AR? Is it? It might be. I don't know.
You're augmenting reality virtually.
Yes, so it's AVR.
AVR.
But
Extended reality.
extended reality. That's a good one.
I've got a couple slides that have every letter in the alphabet followed by R and a definition for each of them. I have to pull those up tomorrow.
There you go. BIM level 5000. Just like that.
FR's good.
Anyway, I mean, my thought would be, and maybe I'm behind on this thought process, but the only reason I would think that you would bring reality capture into an AR environment is to see the changes after construction. Am I wrong there?
I think, well, no, you're not wrong, because I don't think there's a wrong answer, right,
Yeah.
in this context. But for me personally, when I look at something on a computer screen, whether it's in my my registration application, I'm spinning my mouse around and I'm zooming in, zooming out, and I'm getting all mad because the mouse is reversed and all this other kind of stuff, and I'm sitting here and I'm going through this. And then you put on the goggles. But what happens is your visual acuity changes, because now you are in the space. You're not looking at a 2D flat screen. And things that look okay on a flat screen look a little different in virtual reality, right? And so there is, I think right now there is this kind of a 50-50 thing going on with virtual reality, but I can see where it wants to go. We can see where it wants to go, and I think there's a person on this panel that doesn't want to see it go there, right? The question is how long, what's it going to take to get there? And so, it's going to take, once again, it's going to take efforts on your part to help drive that adoption, because we can't do it all on our own, right? Because you got to tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, otherwise this whole thing falls apart.
And that's the beauty of this, of technology. There's multiple solutions. This, I pitched one possible solution to giving us beautiful AR on the job site by using reality capture data as the backbone to localize. But there's also research being done on, tiny, defense grade IMUs. There's somebody that figured out a way to make an IMU out of a torus and blah, 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 and it gives you millimeter accuracy over like 100 feet. Okay, you get that, then yeah, your 2 control points are good enough, because, you get localized once, and then the rest of the day on the job site, you're fine, But the technology will lead us down that path, but I think it's just a matter of time, again, before we have high accuracy AR facilitating activities in the field, reality capture probably will play a critical role in enabling that, whether it's super useful in the active experience. I think that's, to Dominique's point, that's an active question, but is it crucial to probably enabling the overall experience? I think so.
I think that was a great question. And I think that was one point I was going to say earlier is there's not very many people who are using every single technology and AR and VR and mobile. And so the idea of continuing to ask these questions, it really helps all of us think, how do we collaborate to make those types of solutions viable? And some of the points you brought up about if you have that survey control, if you have control on site to reference to, I can't say out a certain vendor, but I've seen in the past, where there are guys that have QR codes that they will install in a facility so that when you take your iPad and you have your model and you've already done your scans, you capture that QR code real quick and then it does come up and you have your model in the real environment. And your other question on if that would then mean you don't need to do reality capture, I don't think that at all would replace it. My thought would be the dream is that you get to use all of them, right? So if it's an existing facility, your first step is always going to be reality capture because you're going to go in and scan the existing environment. Then you're going to go back into the cloud and utilize that for project management and data sharing. Then you're going to model the pieces that you need to tie into design-wise. Then you're going to take it back out into the field with the AR solutions to actually be able to verify again the design in person and get that feel prior to construction. So I think the idea of melding all of those is definitely out there. I think that solution right there, though, the VR, the AR, I think I feel like a little bit behind. We're still melding all of the data and the visual and the sharing. Great question. Thank you very much. And we'll move. I think we've got another one.
Yeah. What technical problem are you terrified your competitor is going to solve?
I did say we took off the boxing gloves, but go ahead.
Tabs in Revit.
And
all right, I'll go. What technological problems am I terrified that my competitors are going to solve? I don't know. The ball that anti-gravity, actually, that would be it. Like, it's funny, you mentioned the Prometheus ball. I think the only thing in the Prometheus ball that I can't see a short path to accomplishing is anti-gravity. Somebody figures out anti-gravity, I'm screwed. Listen, at the end of the day, all of us are in competition. We're all making hardware. We're all making software. We're all ahead in certain areas. We're all behind in certain areas. Like, I think that's the wrong way to think about it. I think I'm excited to see what technological problems my competitors solve, because then I know how to solve them. And then I know they're watching me. And so if I solve a technical problem, they're going to go solve them too, right? Because we kind of each give each other a path. And yes, there's IP, and yes, there's this, but there's usually more than one way to skin a cat. So I apologize if any of you are cat lovers. It's a Texas colloquialism. I grew up there. I say them all the time. But we're all going to be solving things that the other person is like, dang it, I wish I thought of that first. But we'll all have those moments like 3 times a year. And then we'll all go out and figure out our own way to solve those problems. So I think it's just the wrong mindset. I'm not scared of Leica figuring out how to go to 5 million points per second with their next scanner or something, because A, I think that's crazy. B, I think the RTC is fast enough. Good job. B, it's like, okay, they buy components from the same place that my parent company, Topcon, buys components. We all buy components from the same bloody companies. It's not like they invented a super secret, amazing, dark hole generator laser diode thing. No, they're buying the latest fiber laser from said company, and I can buy them too. So, it's like, that's just the way this industry works. It's not like there's some magical thing. It's like, okay, we just keep chasing each other in different areas. We keep catching up.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a fear that someone's going to develop something before the other. I think that as users of the technology, you should continue to really push us all to think about our development and how we evolve the technology. because, you know, if there was no competition, innovation would start to die. So we need to continue that as you know, different manufacturers in this industry, you know, no different than, you know, different consultants in the industry have to find ways to set themselves apart, maybe be the first into a certain client, that type of thing. We'll all continue to develop. We'll all have different unique capabilities that set us apart, that finds, you know, the best fit for different use cases and different industries and different needs that you demand from us. But I think that ultimately, you know, that pushing to us, the continuing to invest in these sensors, that what drives the development, the imagination about what to do next. And it is that competitive spirit that will continue to push all of us to continue to have breakthrough technology.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, I want to say I think we want to see more collaboration over competition, right? Yeah. Anybody want to see more collaboration?
And you're right. The days of all of us going like this are over, right? They have to be if the industry is going to continue to advance. Interoperability, throw up on that word. But our ability to work together, whether we're in competition or not, is imperative, right? Because there's none of us at this talk that has every single solitary answer. Same thing with you. If any of you feel that you have reached the pinnacle of your profession and you have absolutely nothing to learn, then you should be sitting here, right? Because I tell you right now, I got lots to learn, right? And I want to learn from somebody that's reached the pinnacle of their environment and the pinnacle of their ecosystem and the pinnacle of their job, right? If you had nothing to learn, you wouldn't be here. There's always something more to learn, whether it's from your competition or whether it's from each other. So, you know, I'm not afraid of anything that Leica does. They're probably not afraid of anything that we do. We really shouldn't be, right? Because it's that competition that drives innovation, and it's that competition that will drive the industry as a whole.
And I'd like to say something on that note. As a user, you know, we started this because we are a services company. I run Nexus 3D. And part of what helps when the vendors and the hardware and the software all collaborate, it makes it easier for us that are trying to use these technologies actually merge them. And it lets us buy more. If we want to use multiple scanner types, and we can easily go out on a job site, bring those back, merge the datas, model from them together, use the cloud-based. If we could use them all, it would actually let us buy a scanner from each person, because instead of being stuck in a single software or a single hardware, we all run into these challenges. But I think that we're continuing to see more of that widespread adoption. You know, and like mentioned, when somebody comes out with something new, we see a little bit of the spread. Everybody gets that idea. We see scanners getting smaller. Does anybody remember the first scanner they saw on a spot dog? And then you see like everybody has a spot dog.
Well, actually, if FedEx would find where my spot was, he'd be here. But it was, you know,
It's on a boat.
He's probably on a boat out in LA someplace, but you know, I've got batteries in the mount, but I got no dog. So, you know, if anybody sees a little yellow dog wandering around, let me know.
So you're saying that dog just don't hunt?
That's true. Well, and you know, people ask as well, you know, being a service provider, and we honestly, I would say at least half the people in this room I've actually worked with. I've collaborated with, I've scanned with, I've modeled with, and people ask me the same question. They're like, why are you doing a podcast giving away your secrets about how you scan, what the use cases are, or why are you sharing all this information publicly? And it's the same response that I have that I love hearing from everybody is, when I educate people on the uses of all these technologies, sure, some of them are going to choose to go get a scanner, and I might lose a scanning client. Some of them might choose to model, and I might lose a modeling client. But ultimately, we're helping grow the industry in a whole, because in the last 5 years since starting our business, we've traveled and worked in 40 states. Now, long term, that's not sustainable. Most companies can't accomplish handling nationwide projects for clients who have projects in every single state. So I think the further we go in in increasing the service providers, increasing the use cases, selling more scanners, but making sure that it's done properly, making sure you're getting the right scanner for what you guys are doing with your industry and your project types, and then the collaboration into those softwares, into the virtual, I think is what's going to help the community as a whole grow this together successfully with less headaches, with less clients saying something didn't work right because someone used the wrong data. So that's why we started all this. I'm going to wrap up with that. Thank you guys very much for the panel. Let's give them a hand for joining us today.